Look who I got to interview, Justin Baldoni. Some of you might know him from Jane the Virgin. Some of you might know him from his incredible TED Talk. And some of you may have read this book. If you have not read this book, you have to go get this book. It's in bookstores. I got mine at Barnes and Noble, the few bookstores that are still open that let you walk in with a mask or online. But I really, really recommend that you buy this book. Not only if you care about issues surrounding masculinity and how to raise our boys differently and how men can step up and start doing the work to reclaim their humanity, the humanity that our society and certain gender pressure has stripped men of in various ways by not giving them permission to feel their whole range of emotions. So if you're interested in that, you're going to love this conversation. And just if you're not even interested in that, he's a great writer. He's super funny, and his vulnerability really shines through. It reminds me of something Ira Glass said, which is we read first person writing to know ourselves. And I feel like you are going to know yourself through Justin's story. He is that vulnerable and that brave in his storytelling. So I really obviously recommend it. And I hope he inspires the men out there and the fathers out there to do the hard emotional work of looking at themselves and knowing that it takes incredible strength to be vulnerable and honest and to love deeply, to be intimate. And then I also want you to check out his podcast of the same name, Man Enough. And it's with famous feminist Liz Plank, who has a book called For the Love of Men. I had the chance to speak to her last year briefly, and she's incredible. Love her. And Justin's friend, Jamie Heath. So you can get that wherever you get your podcasts. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Okay, so what I'm most interested in talking to you about is the strength of vulnerability and the impetus to be more vulnerable. So I know you had that period of time in your life that you were really low, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about your two guy friends, Adam and was it Andy?
Oh, Adam and Andy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and how you slept on their couches.
Yeah.
But to me, that was such a big moment in your life because you were taken in and accepted, and these people held space for you. So I wanted to talk about what that experience was like because it seems like that's a theme in your life and story, this idea of holding space.
Yeah. So when I was 20, I think it was 25, 24, 25, I was in a 4-year relationship that ended. And in that relationship, I really lost myself, as many people do. Many women,
I know.
more often than not, lose themselves.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how, when I look back at my life and I love to read books that are written by women and talk to women. I find that I really resonate a lot with the experiences of women in terms of, in many situations, I have been the woman in that situation, or I've had the stereotypically female experience in that interaction or something along those lines. And in the situation with my ex, I had lost myself in that relationship. It was only about her. Who I was, my spirit, my faith, all of it. If she didn't like it, in some ways, I just kind of suppressed it and numbed it and, swept it under the rug and made it seem like not that big of a deal. And there's a lot of reasons why I did that. But part of it was that I was not filled, right? I was not full of myself. I was not filled. And so I was looking for her to fill me.
You were not embodied.
Absolutely.
Right.
Or I had a lot of trauma and I didn't feel I was enough. And it was the relationship that made me at times feel like I was enough, even though it really didn't. So part of it was, I have a deep faith, and, of course, in many faiths, you're encouraged to not live with the person before you're married or have premarital sex and all of those types of things. And my best friends and we were kind of we were all in this faith together, and over the course of this 4 years, I just really kind of lost a lot of my faith, and I put her first. Right, I made her the God in my life. When I kind of made the choice to put her first, I thought that I would, these friends were gone. I thought that they would judge the way that I was living or my lifestyle or all the things that we think that we don't ever really know. And when the relationship ended, and it ended in quite a funny way, as I found out on Twitter that she was actually dating her co-star.
Oh my goodness!
Even though she denied it till the end. They're now married, by the way, with kids. So clearly that was the case. But at the time, she made me feel crazy for even assuming that could potentially, possibly, theoretically be the case, as we always do when we're in the wrong and we, become the victims.
Yeah.
I was left with, we had 2 dogs. I was living with this girl. She was, really emotionally already with this other person. And I was like, what do I have? I was at my lowest. I had no money. My first 2 calls were Adam and Andy, because even though we hadn't been super, super close over those 4 years, I didn't have anybody else. So I called them and they rushed over to me, and no judgment, no anything, no told you this wasn't right, no, you shouldn't have done that. It was like, we're so happy for you. It was like, welcome back. And they just brought me in. I'll never forget Andy, who became Andy Grammer, sitting on the couch in front of me as I was crying my eyes out about this, and he starts crying. And I've never had a man be that empathetic, right? It makes me tear up thinking about it, because he just started crying and he's like, I feel how much you're hurting and I'm so sorry. And so I went and I slept on their couch for a few months in this crappy little apartment on La Brea in Los Angeles. And we were all like, boy men, like man children. I think Andy was still microwaving tuna fish at the time. And it was just this beautiful experience of men showing up emotionally in a way I didn't know was possible. Yeah. And they continue to be 2 of my best friends to this day. We've grown together over the last 15 years. And yeah, it was just, but again, I was still hesitant because I didn't know, my default was that I had nobody. And then I took that risk and I said, I need help. And there they were. And I believe more often than not, if we would be willing to take risks, to reach out to the men in our lives, to our friends, when we're at our lowest, we'll see that they all show up for us. And, that's what I want to make space for, is for men to know that will and can happen. What's really important in the conversation is for men to realize that there is nothing stronger that's more manly than breaking that through those invisible barriers, through those gender norms, and becoming close to another man, reaching out for help when you need help, asking questions, letting yourself feel the things that you need to feel, being compassionate and empathetic, sitting on the other end of the couch and crying for your friend because he's crying, standing up for what you believe in, standing up and speaking out on behalf of people who are marginalized or who you are witnessing being bullied. There's nothing more manly than these things. And I actually believe that we should, if we're going to keep it gendered, fine, keep it gendered, then just use it in the way that it's meant to be used, which is like, are you man enough then? Let's flip it on its head. Well, that's what I'm fine. And I'm fine keeping it gendered, because I actually think,
let's do this.
I actually think like we're not going to get rid of the gendering of it, at least not in the next few generations.
Yeah.
So use it and say to these guys, like, all right, bro, are you fucking man enough to do this? Like, go to therapy. Why are you like, do you think that's manly? The other day I was at my daughter turned 6. We had her birthday party at the beach on Sunday, and we're setting up, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this family. I see this dude and his wife and their little boy. The little boy wants to go play in the ocean. The wife takes him and asks the guy to set up this tent, one of these like pop-up tents. Out of the corner of my eye, I can just see it's windy. This brother is struggling. Like he it's backwards, it's upside down. The thing is just like, I think the kid probably messed with it. You can just see him looking and trying to figure this out. And 5 minutes turns into 10, turns into 20, turns into 30. And finally, I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to ask this guy if he needs help. He's going to have a hard time with it, but I know he's going to say yes. And because I've been in this situation so many times, I just walked over and I'm like, hey, man, can I help? I know these are, and I made a joke about like, these things are the worst inventions in the entire world. It's like this in car seats. It's like, could you make something harder to put together? And he's like, yeah, man, thanks. I think my, my kid messed with this last night, and all the things we say to make ourselves feel better. And then we start doing it, and I'm like, this seems really backwards. And it's just two of us trying to figure this out. And he's appreciative, but also like you could tell his masculinity's in check and question. And I say to him, and I'm like, do you have the directions? This just happened on Sunday. And he's like, oh yeah, they're over there. And they were sitting 5 feet away from him the entire time. He was trying to put this thing together. The directions were literally within arm length. And this man could not find it in himself to read directions.
Right. That
is what I'm talking about. We have, as men, we've built up this like this I don't know what it is. It's like this false sense of manliness or power that like us men need to be able to figure it out ourselves, right? It's one of the greatest myths of masculinity that we have to do it alone. Right. The Lone Ranger, like, riding off into the sunset, the mythical lone wolf, what's really is just, if you like, researchers show that like the lone wolf is really just a lonely wolf. Right. It's not something that anyone would want to aspire to, because wolves run in packs. Like their hierarchy is just like families. Yeah. So a lone wolf is like the black sheep. It's like the outcast. It's not a good thing. You don't want to be the lone wolf. The lone wolf is going to die of starvation because it doesn't have a pack to help it hunt food. Right. It's not big and strong and tough. It's depressed, which is what we are. So yeah, we have this myth that we got to do it alone. And it's so funny. Like, even with me to this day, having just written a book about it, I'm confronted with this stuff all the time in my own life. Like, no, I got it. Please, I got it. With my own wife. No, I know where I'm going. It's fine. Or, I got in an argument with my wife about it. We were in Sweden and we were driving the boat, and she was like, baby, you're missing it. I'm like, no, I'm not.
And meanwhile, you missed it.
And meanwhile, I missed it. And it's just like, it's like we feel these things as attacks on our gender, on our masculinity, which we have decided makes us our person.
Going back to the strength to be vulnerable. So calling your friends and letting them know you weren't okay and they held space for you. That comes up a lot with Emily, where on really important occasions, sexually, it seems from your book, and also before you were getting married, that she just was so great at loving you and holding space for you and not judging you, which then made it safe. And I've heard a lot of stories from men where that safe space isn't there, that women have also internalized the masculine.
Well, there's a part of that happened with us too. 100%. And many men have that exact same experience.
Right.
Think about that for a second. How can you expect to not view men as weak when they show emotion if you were raised that way? I believe deep down, even though we're doing terrible things and we're raising our children in these ways and we're causing them damage and trauma and we're having them grow up and feel like they need to be something more than they are, what's underneath it all, the reason why we're doing it as men is because we don't want our girls and our boys to be hurt in the ways that we were. We then try to desensitize our children, try to toughen up our children so that the world doesn't eat them up. And that's why I still have compassion for men who are not the best fathers, who are not teaching their kids the best things as it relates to emotional intelligence, or setting their children up to live happy, fulfilling lives where they feel like they're enough, because they're doing it out of protection. They're trying to prevent what probably happened to them or what they see happening all over the world.
Right. And not knowing that on the other side of being more human and connecting more, that that's really where strength is. Like
Yeah.
being more vulnerable, you have more wealth in your life, like the wealth of love, the wealth of connection. And you've
Yeah.
that. But a lot of people can't, stand looking. I love the line that you said, like looking at their shame, looking at your shame in the face and
Yeah.
seeking help, like really going there,
Yeah.
exposing yourself.
It's so important. It's so important to stare at, because when you don't look at it, when you leave it in the basement, when you just pretend like it's not there, it grows, it becomes moldy, and it festers, and it becomes cancerous and toxic and all of the things. And then it takes over our lives.
What inspired me to create Build Up Boys is I was looking for programs to help with social emotional intelligence because I had no modeling, and I wanted to make sure that they grew up to feel connected to their hearts, and there wasn't much out there. And I agree with you about when you said that even the most progressive parents are like, I don't want my son to be soft. And so I'd
Yeah.
love your thoughts on raising boys.
Sure. Well, I'm happy you did that, because you're right. There's not a lot out there, and it's very hard. And yeah, even the woke people, even the left people, everyone, it's like we need strong boys because we don't want the world to tear them apart. In reality, that's a band-aid. We should be building up emotionally intelligent children who have empathy and compassion and sensitivity, so that the world can change, not so that we can react to the world. And so, one of the things that I'm specifically doing, and I talk about this in the book, and I even include the kind of mantra that they say at the end of the book, is I came up with this phrase: the heart is the strongest muscle in my body. Because I know inevitably that the world's going to tell my son that his muscles are more important, his exterior muscles, his biceps and his arms. And also he sees his dad working on those things. But it was equally as important for him to see his dad working on his heart, and that the heart is the strongest muscle in your body, and what the heart actually does, and how the heart beats all day long, and it never stops, and it beats and it beats and it beats and it beats and it beats, and it pumps blood, and it goes faster and slower, and and eventually when we go to heaven, it's when our heart stops. But that's when we're hopefully really, really old. And it's a super, super strong muscle. And so every night before they go to bed, they say this kind of mantra: the heart is the strongest muscle in my body. We talk about loving themselves and that they are enough. And when I was thinking about it, I thought, okay, how would I do it differently than my parents? I know the world is going to tell my son, no matter if his dad's an author and a speaker and doing all the things he's doing around masculinity, the world is going to tell my son that being a man is all the opposite of the stuff that I'm telling him. Then I need to double down.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing with the boy and the girl is I'm actually raising them a little bit differently, and that I'm raising my son generally in the ways that we would sometimes raise girls, and that I'm trying to bring out his emotion and his compassion and his gentleness and his nurturing and his kindness and his sensitivity, and applaud those things, and tell him, that he's beautiful, and that he's smart, and that he's so much more than his body. He's so much more than all of these things. Teaching him to listen and to be mindful and to not speak over people, and trying, by the way, failing a lot, but trying, because I know that the world's going to eventually ask him to numb those things. Right. So if I can reinforce as much of that as I can now, then by the time he gets out into the schoolyard and those boys start to tell him that he's a girl and he's weak, he'll have enough of a foundation to know that that's all performative and they're just insecure, and that he's okay. He's enough as he is. He doesn't have to prove his worth. He's always going to want to prove himself. He's always going to want to be one of the boys. I can't change that. That's what he's shown me, but I can prepare him for it. And my daughter, the world's going to tell her that she needs to be in line and be soft and not take up too much space and cross her legs and be pretty and put together and organized and all of the things that the world's going to tell her. Then I want her to to while she's in the house with me and while she's young, to be a risk taker and to take up space and to be loud and to take physical risk. So I'm telling my son to be more careful. I'm telling my daughter to take more risks, and trying to bring those things out of her while also not drowning out the parts of her that are naturally feminine. She's extremely sensitive and emotional. And these are good and important things. So I think she can be both, right? That whole idea, like a girl can be both. I think she can. And I also think that a boy can be both.
Yes.
I think that a boy can be both sensitive, compassionate, and a risk taker if he wants to be or chooses to be. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to like offset the future of what I know is going to end up happening, and so that they have a strong foundation.
I love that. That is such good advice. I love that.
Who knows if it'll work, but we're trying. I don't know. No one really knows. We all write these books and we all, but no one really knows.
The other thing I will say, you say in your book, is that you cry in front of him. You're modeling it. So
that's the big part. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're showing him, hey, I'm a man and look at me. I'm doing these things. I'm connecting with other men. I have this wonderful relationship with my wife. I'm crying, like I'm enough. And that's what he's going to see. So
and also, and the big piece in that though, is I'm showing him that I am imperfect.
Yes.
That I'm not a superhero, that I don't have the answers always, that I hurt. The other day I didn't have a great day. And when I picked them up from summer camp, they said, my daughter's like, what did you do today? Which is so sweet. And I told them, Daddy had a hard day. I was feeling sad today because this thing happened. And they're like, what? And then they get defensive and they get mad at the people that made me sad. It's so sweet. But it's important that they see that that I'm human and that I have all the feelings, and that it's okay that I have the feelings.